What if I told you the oldest copies of the Bible, the scripture itself, the modern Bible that we read, is not accurate? When the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, they revealed that scribes actually edited out other gods. The truth in the original text is Yahweh wasn't this supreme creator. Spoiler. Instead, he was just one of 70 of these divine children, a piece of this divine council. So, let's look at the verses, context, and the other ancient Near East traditions that bring up Yahweh. What was his role? Who was he? What did he become? Welcome back to Chasing the Past. Glad to see you. I know it's been a minute. Please don't yell at me, okay? Clearly, we're in a new place. I've been revamping around here and trying to get on this schedule where I can just hit the button and they can go. Now, today is something that really opened my eyes to, well, the ancient Near East in general. But the fact that we forget that the overlap between this idea of Yahweh that we have and then the rest of the world around it, as if they don't merge. So, I thought it'd be fun if we just went over some of these foundations that kind of explored the idea for me and then opened it up to modern scholarship. And, I could name the scholars, but if you watch this for a while, you know who I'm talking about. Damn it, Levant. Sorry, I sneeze. Anyway, the piece, when I discovered I have a book upstairs called Ancient Near East Traditions. Those traditions have very similar vocabulary in regards to the same vocabulary that I was used to in church. So I was like, do those connect? Do they connect at all? And I went down the rabbit hole, and turns out they do. And unfortunately, in the modern lens, and I've seen this a lot actually, Baal, or Baal, has been associated as far away as possible from Yahweh. When the reality might be, and we'll get into it in this video, that as you go down the path, and you follow the actual, ancient Near East traditions, you follow the text, you follow everything that the Israelites would have come from, well, then you kind of understand a little bit better, how these things could be merged together, and then how, just like religion in general, develops, grows, and builds over time. So we'll get into that. Now, again, if you've been following this channel for a while, and I appreciate you guys, thank you so much. I can't emphasize how cool it is to meet people like you who interact on this same level. It's something I never could have guessed, something I couldn't have predicted at all. But the world sometimes can feel kind of alone, and meeting people who have questions, like I have questions, or doubts about certain things that they've heard or seen growing up. Anyway, I really appreciate it. And I think these are important questions, especially now in this modern time. There's a point where the things we're told, traditions we're supposed to uphold, don't last any longer. There's a period where the mind goes, I don't know if that might be different. And you're okay. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to question those things. If not, then you might want to look deeper at the thing that you're reading. Because then it becomes less about, let's say, spiritual involvement or growth, and more about control, power, dominance. And I'm seeing the swing, a beautiful swing, but we're hitting this peak where the conflict is now starting to arise between one side and the other. And I think information, data, proper data, and the context in which we read these texts that we hold close to our hearts is going to be the thing that really wins. Now, unless people are saying,
Okay.
I almost said saying it correctly, but I'm not saying in regards to scholarship that that's the only voice. I know I'm going on a rant. It's pretty early, but just hang for a sec. Unless we get that data out and we look at it for what it is, then, again, Dr. Justin Sledge, if we let our faith dictate our history, we betray both. Perfectly, one sentence said it perfectly. I'm not trying to discredit faith, not trying to discredit religious belief. I'm not trying to eliminate the way that you've kind of built your life around something. But I do think that in understanding certain data points, we can determine truth. And in truth, we can be better as people, better in the future, and hopefully do something proper with it rather than power, control, and dominance. Right? There's something in there that speaks to you, speaks to me. It's bigger than the both of us. You can't touch it. It's intangible, but it's there. And one of these items that I remember very vividly, I'm having these flashback memories now, is that this Yahweh figure, God, is on top. And he's always been on top. And it's God of all, and it's, it's non-domineering, right? No control, right? Give you free will. And then you go, wait, this is the same God as the other God? Interesting. And I kind of wanted to explore that because it helped me, and hopefully, just like the purpose of what we're doing here, is to help you or answer questions, or even better, spark those questions that you have that you're afraid to ask. That's the whole point. So, everybody knows I love that 1177 BC book. Dr. Eric Klein, please, I'd love to talk to you. This southern area of the Levant was this vibrant melting pot of religious and cultural evolution, right? You can see it, you can track it, you can even dig it up. And many scholars don't argue about this. It's a very clear line between excuse me, hold on. Everybody knows that I love 1177, right? That book, Dr. Eric Klein, you're the best, okay? Please, one day I'd love to talk to you. But he really illuminated this idea of the Southern Levant being this melting pot, this cultural and religious movement of like spiritual and, I guess, law-abiding, but this evolution of like cultural and religious belief that merge and that grow together, and it builds and builds and builds. And I don't think that's such a foreign idea to think that religion itself would evolve based on the time periods. Like, you can see things that we do as humanity collectively that move towards a positive direction. I mean, first thing that came to mind was like, okay, slavery, bad. We determined it's bad. To be honest, if it's the religious text, don't do that. It's like, if you have to do that, and again, there's a piece that's missing. I'm noticing that we forget that we have the say, the choice, and the free will that we talk about to change the outcome, right? And a good analogy I've been talking about, again, we're doing a podcast called The Working Crew, right? Go follow. Me and my buddy TJ, and we're talking about this, and we're just sitting there thinking for a good amount of time, like, is it wrong in the religious text? No. Is it wrong in our modern lens? Yes. Okay. Who's almost like, well then, so are we right? Should we? And I remember I just flipped the question to him. I go, so if God says it's cool, you cool with it? Again, a young black dude. And he goes, what are you asking me? I go, hold on. No, please. Don't. It's just to make you think. And so part of this analytical part of my mind went to, okay, well, if that's that evolution, that piece that moves, right? Is there a piece of Yahweh that moves as humanity moves, as they evolve, as we develop text, as we, choose to do this new thing, if we go this different direction, right? Does that move? And, there are very deep overlapping connections between Yahweh and Baal. And if you don't want to admit it, that's fine. I'm not pushing you to. I'm just going to give you the data. We're going to go through it. Now, I guess the Amorites too. They have Amaru. We'll get into it. So Amaru and Baal, right? So prior and during the collapse, the Bronze Age collapse, the Amorites of this early second millennia, they popularized this storm god, right? And this is Baal, right? Not the one that you associate with demonic activity and the terrible stuff, right? It's the god of storms. This is the Thor of the ancient Near East, right? That's a clip. That's exactly what it is. And so this god, Amura, represents this Baal, right? This storm deity. And again, this is the Amorites. Now, this storm god is also this warrior, this great tribal leader, right? He has all the traits of a warrior, and then it becomes synonymous with Baal. And then Baal eventually becomes synonymous with, you're good. You guessed it, Yahweh. Now, a good motif, and I remember this in church, is God is the rider on the clouds. I remember that. And I remember I just put it in quotes, and I put, rider of the clouds. Is this Yahweh description similar to any other ancient Near East cosmology? Again, you're going to find a ton, but we're going to stick with these three. So, Amura, Baal, Yahweh. So you can see the evolution as we go down the line. And this means, as he rides on the clouds, he controls the rains, storms, right, and natural disaster, right? So you pray to this deity, so that way you don't get any of those bad things. So you don't, right? It's almost as if you understand that you're just this little person on this little rock, and you're like, I can control any of this stuff. What do I do? Right? And again, very beneficial. But when you lock in the lens to look through it, it can be very dangerous. Now, in this Iron Age, right? So you know what? We're going to skip that. Let's just go into the shared storm god attributes. So, again, in the Iron Age, the kingdom of Israel and Judah developed Yahweh, which evolved from a regional deity, right, to this southernmost Edom, Midian, national god, this deity figure. And so in doing so, Yahweh then absorbed many of these mythological characteristics. Whose characteristics? Baal, right? And then the previous one, Amura. Now, this poetry, we'll get into the poetry. There's lots of Psalms, a little bit in Deuteronomy, right? And it's very like primordial. It's very like you're battling these sea deities. It's very much Mesopotamian, right? Sumerian to me, right? Like the Tiamat idea, where Tiamat gets split in half and the water split, and it's this primordial chaos that Yahweh is able to essentially cut in half and to make sense of, because we can't. And again, this Tiamat dragon then is also, very similar to like was Atlantis, but Leviathan. Sorry, I had to jog my memory. Now, so the early Israelite religion, right? This conflict between Yahweh and Baal, like at a certain point, they're probably together, right? Not always like so opposite. They're kind of the same. It's like, you know what it is? It's like frenemies, right? Yahweh and Baal, the frenemies of the ancient Near East. I like that. And, this, again, remember the context. The Bronze Age collapse, right? Everything falls apart. How do you make sense of it falling apart? We sinned, right? It's just a group of people trying to take something, an idea, pull it together, and make sense of the chaos. Again, completely rational, justified. I'm not saying it in any, let's say, put it anti-Semitic way, but it does pull the community together in a way where you can operate effectively in a world that you perceive to be chaotic, and honestly probably is very chaotic. And the warrior style of both Yahweh and Baal, you can see the resemblance. And so now later you get this syncretism, right? They merge them together, the ideas come together, and these consolidated groups then decide, okay, we like some of that, but we also like some of this. And so the two gods that we're going to take from the Ugaritic text, Canaanite tradition, the group of people that the Israelites would eventually come from, we're going to take El and Baal, put them together, and we're going to get Yahweh. So this, and again, we later get this Deuteromistic, history, where we kind of forget this connection point. And but if we forget that, again, if we use our faith to dictate the history, we betray both of these things. Now, eventually, Baal gets, lowered, demonized. What a terrible God. And then Yahweh gets pushed up to the top. And this becomes this supreme deity that we all are familiar with. But again, I'll just read it word for word. So this term, Baal, which means Lord or Master, right, is used by the Israelites to describe Yahweh himself. Now, Hosea fiercely condemns this practice, demanding this linguistic and religious purity away from the both of them being, frenemies, like they're close, now to being complete opposite, right? They're so far away from each other, they're not even close, even though before they were. And again, it's just a part of this localized cultural evolution where Yahweh receives or takes on the qualities of Baal, this cosmic storm deity, this figure that's, praised in hymns and the images of him, like on the clouds, right? Kind of Zeus-like. And again, this is all in the area of the Levant. So I'm not going to go on a rant. I almost did. Anyway, this also ties into Amura, which is the Amorite storm deity. So we have these three deities that have the same qualities. They eventually take up these qualities and then, interesting. But because we're so far away from it, it's so far away from our understanding of what it is. Hold on. As cultures evolve, they get farther away from the original context, right? To justify what's happening here, happening there, happening here. And the primary idea we're going to start with is Amura, right? This Amorite storm deity. So the ancient Bronze Age in the Levant, right? This is Syria, Lebanon. This is a crucial political waypoint. The region in the Bronze Age, this southern Levant, right? This is a crucial point in the Bronze Age where the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Midianites, right? They all converge at this one point. So this Semitic-speaking nomadic and pastoralist, right, pasture people, migrate from the desert regions into Mesopotamia. And when they do this, the Mesopotamian mythology, so again, Amura or Martu is this patron god of the Amorites, these nomads. And, again, the same quality as the storm god, right? The western wilderness, the steppe, this deity that is like, okay, please don't come down and use your warrior forces and strike us down. And in modern scholarship, this ancient Near East cosmology, Baal and Yahweh, they're not viewed as the same deity. And I want to make that clear. They're not the same. I'm saying that as culture and religion evolves, they become the same thing, right? They pick those qualities, they take them, and they use them. So that's the syncretism we're talking about. And again, remember where the Israelites come from, right? This ancient land of Canaan, this melting pot of culture where they pull these things from. And most of those traits of Yahweh, the early ones, not the one where you see the dude in the throne sitting up top, but this fierce warrior storm deity, that comes from this land of Canaan, right? This melting pot. And I mean, a good example is, again, this divine cloud rider, right? The person who rides the storm clouds. And we'll get into this, but again, many Psalms, and we have a little bit in Deuteronomy that we're going to go into, but this ancient Near East cosmology also features the storm deity, right? Defeating the chaotic sea. Sounds like Tiamat or Leviathan. And the scholarship notes here that I have, in the Ugaritic text, we similarly read of a seven-headed dragon, referring to as having been defeated by the god Baal. Now, this motif is directly transferred to Yahweh crushing Leviathan in the waters of chaos in texts like Psalm 74, 13-14, Isaiah 27, 1. So, these roots are in this divine council. So, Yahweh was originally imported from a storm deity from the southern region of Judah, integrated as a second-tier member of the Canaanite pantheon, specifically among these sons of El. Now, by doing this, Yahweh's cult eventually grew bigger, and then Yahweh first merged with El, right, this patriarch deity head of the Canaanite pantheon, and subsequently absorbed the attributes of both, right? So you have El and Baal. So you have the dude on the throne with the long beard, right, chiseled, looking like Zeus, and then you also have the god that I assume the Western world would perceive as accurate, right? This loving, kind, like peaceful, like forgiveness type, right? You have both qualities. You have the ability to be the warrior storm goddess, and then also this forgiving, loving, sitting on top of the throne type of dude. And again, this would eventually rule over the pantheon, but the title should be enough, right? And so, remember we said Baal means Lord, Master. This is interesting. Owner. Yeah, I mean, I guess if it's the storm, right? Like, even in a thunderstorm, I get terrified and I go inside, like, what are we going to do? Like, there's nothing I can do. I mean, I have a house. But other than that, like, nothing. Anyway, So, again, some scholars do propose that Baal might have initially been the title for God of Israel, because it means Lord. Now, again, later rejected, but an interesting, kind of intersection that we're getting at, where now you have to redefine it. You have to go, okay, we're going to distinguish Yahweh away from any connection point that we have, right? So you see, as the evolution of this culture goes up, the separation gets higher and higher and higher, or I guess farther and farther and farther. But something that was interesting was Psalm 29, right? It's the thunderstorm of Baal, and how that reference is also the same that we get in biblical context. So in the Ugaritic text, this parallel is this sevenfold repetition of the voice of the Lord, which is thunder, and in this Ugaritic parallel, we get this, Lord of thunder, right? The voice of the Lord, this thunder. And this matches the Ugaritic descriptions of Baal letting his voice resound over the mountains. And the verse, 29, 3-6. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon leap like a calf, Sirion like a young wild ox. This cosmic victory, right? The psalm concludes as Yahweh sits enthroned over the flood, which mirrors Baal's establishment and his kingship by conquering Yam, which is this primordial sea, right? Very similar to a lot of ancient Near East cosmology. And Psalm 68 also has the cloud rider. The epic is the rider of the clouds. And in the verse, you have Psalms 68:4. Sing to God, sing praises to his name, lift up a song to him who rides upon the clouds. His name is the Lord, exult before him. In this manifestation of verses 7 and 8, the earth shakes, the rain pours down, at the presence of God marching from the wilderness, which echoes Baal's role as the bringer of winter rain. And again, a lot of these things that are kind of neat, and it's kind of cool to go in my mind, is the idea of these sea monsters, these primordial creatures that, have they need to be tamed. Who can we tame them? And it's just this deity figure that goes, he will. He's got this. And then you just put it in place and you're like, perfect, that'll work. So another thing, this Leviathan figure in the Ugaritic text, it was a Litan, the fleeing serpent, the twisted serpent, and it has 7 heads. Now, in Psalm 74, 13-14, it is you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the monster in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave him as food to the creatures of the desert. Psalm 89, 9-10. You rule over the surging sea. When its waves mount up, you still them. You crushed Rahab like one of the slain with your strong arm, and then you scattered to the enemies. So, again, I'm just reading it, but as I'm reading it, I go, what? I go, that's all right. That's pretty clear. I can see where we're coming from. And again, Psalm 82 has the divine council. So, the council of El, pay attention. You know what I'm talking about. It's the huge, giant, top of the list Canaanite figure. And again, I noticed that too pretty easily when I took a step back, and many of the Hebrew words like El Elyon, right, Lord of the Most High, right, El is right at the beginning, and we'll get into that later. So Psalm 82, at Ugarit the gods gather at the assembly of the gods, right, on the sacred mountain. Puhura Ma'adi. That's wrong. So it uses the exact same imagery in Psalms 82 and uses the plural word Elohim to denote lesser gods before they are stripped of their immortality. So Psalm 82:1 and 6-7, God takes his stand in the divine assembly. He judges amongst the gods. I said, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High, El Elyon. But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. So, there's this balance, this power balance, or this vacuum, right? Where then Yahweh jumps on top, right up top the list. And there's a prophetic prayer in this Canaanite war, myth 2, Habakkuk 3, the march of the warrior god. So this Eucharitic parallel presents Yahweh wielding a bow, arrows, and spears, fighting against the personified forces of river and sea, who were Baal's primary rivals in this Eucharitic cycle. Now, the verse exactly 3:8 and 11, were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots of victory? You uncovered your bow, your arrows flashed by like light, your shining spear like lightning. So, in this, to conclude this section, there is a very clear connection in ancient Near East, mythology, religious ideology, whatever you want to call it, the text that defined the culture that read these books, where you can see the connection between the general area, the Canaanite population, this ancient Near East swapping culturally of text, to where you can see the divine connection between this figure and the other ones around. And it's not, we know humanity. We know this happens. It's not weird. It's a very common thing. And I think we're getting to a point where collectively we're smart enough to know the difference. I mean, it doesn't seem super difficult to me. Just admit what it is, be okay with it, and realize just a book. It's just a thing we needed for the time. And again, some of the other things I'm going to mention, since we're on the topic of Yahweh being on top, there is this Deuteronomistic text. So it's Deuteronomy 32, 8-9. And this is parting of nations, right? So the later edit of this Masoretic text sounds like this. Again, this all hinges on the Dead Sea Scrolls. We found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is 1,000 years earlier than our Masoretic text, gives us a better idea of the change. So the edit you get in the Masoretic text is it reads like this. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. Okay, I remember hearing that. Then, Dead Sea Scroll fragment, the earlier one, when the Most High, El Elyon, gave the nations their inheritance, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, B'nai Elohim. So, it's not the sons of Israel, it's the sons of God, the other deity figures in this divine council. So, one of these divine council members. Now, the polytheistic context gets, we get a little more deeper. In Canaanite mythology, again, Ugaritic, the chief god El and his consort Asherah had exactly 70 children. These are the B'nai Elohim. Probably both. I just go with me, Google it. I'll put it somewhere on the screen. Now, this Israelite cosmology gets translated into their worldview, and then this Elyon, so El, divided the world into 70 nations, because those are his divine children. Yahweh is assigned one portion of that, which is Israel. So, we think of Yahweh as this big figure above everybody else. He's just one of the kids. Right? He later gets moved into this higher category as we, as humanity, evolved and brought it with us. That doesn't mean that's where he started, right? So if anything, I'm not saying to do it right now, but like in realizing that, just go, instead of like, a dear God, go, dear L. I mean, technically he'd be the dad in this ancient Near East cosmology. So this older version, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I don't know why this isn't talked about. Probably because it hurts their feelings. But Yahweh isn't the supreme creator. He's one of these little teeny kids who gets one portion of people to rule that area. And again, I see two paths in my brain where I can run with this. I won't. We're going to stick to the text. But the first one, maybe it's a video later. The first one is like, okay, I wonder if these 70 children become personified figures at these real nations. And then you're like, oh, why would you build this giant temple? Well, this is what he looks like. Let me just carve him out of this fancy stone. Well, it's so out there. I understand. And then, of course, number 2 is like, oh, what do we get? We need something to have for ourselves. Yahweh, that'll be one of the 70. Pick it, use it. And if we win out over time, doesn't matter. We at least bridge the gap between this chaos and at least have each other, right? And that's a very positive thing to have. I'm not discrediting that. I think we just get lost a little bit, where we're like, this is it, and this is what it's always been, and no one's going to change that. Again, it could be completely different 100 years from now. But eventually, Yahweh then becomes this head of the divine council. So, I'll just read both. I'll read the later edit from the Masoretic text of Deuteronomy 32:43. So, this is the conclusion of the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32. Now, this is key, I'm just saying the facts, but it sounds like I'm trying to hurt your feelings. I'm not. The whole point of this conclusion is to erase the existence of other celestial beings. Right? Just remove them from any relationship to Yahweh, make him as far away from them as possible, even though that's not the origin point of where he comes from. So, Masoretic text. Rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. The Dead Sea Scroll fragment. Rejoice, O heavens, with him. Bow down to him, all you gods. Elohim, little e. For he will avenge the blood of his sons. The Masoretic text completely removes the command for other gods to worship Yahweh. The Dead Sea Scrolls, alongside the ancient Greek Septuagint, preserve the original polytheistic hymn structure. It depicts Yahweh returning victorious from battle and demanding submission from the rest of the pantheon. 1,000 years difference, and we have no idea. We think, been on top, always on top, no problem. If you're okay with not having truth as the backbone, okay. But don't preach to us that it's always been a fact. It's always been changed in the context as it moves through history. So, the whole thing, to kind of conclude this in the video, sorry if it's taking so long. Hope you like the setup. After this Babylonian exile, the whole point is to enforce monotheistic view. Right? So, instead of being henotheistic like it used to be, right? So the idea of recognizing one God as your guy, but there are gods around. Now we're going straight monotheistic. We're going to take all that out. We're going to go one all the way. Now, again, it is known that scribes altered these phrases. Sons of gods or gods then become sons of Israel and angels. This just scholarship. It avoids the implication that Yahweh was anywhere near these other gods, the other figures. And the whole point is trying to separate him from the other divine figures, make him above them. That's just period. The second one is eventually, which is what we're dealing with right now, is that when you say God and you think of Yahweh, the beginning is him as one of these 70 partitioned nation deities, not the one on top. So, word it how you will, but God has a daddy. And now, I bit my lip during that laugh. It might be bleeding. When I figured this out, I thought the conclusion would just be to simply give you why. Why would this happen? Why would they do that? Why would they? What? Well, why would they lie about that? This is pure survival in crisis. It's about community, connectivity, and just bridging the gap to try to bring order to this chaos. So, we'll go through a little bit of a timeline. I bit my lips hard. So, the reinterpretation was, again, a radically new idea. But after 586 BCE, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, and then they exiled the elite. In ancient Near East cosmology, losing a war meant your national god was weaker than the enemy's. So, they had to reinterpret it like, oh, he's not weak, he was the only god. So, he used the Babylonians to punish Israel for worshiping other deities. Boom. Now, there's our shift. And then, as these exiled people come together, they needed unity, community. We need to bring everybody back together. How do you do that? Exclusive devotion to Yahweh, and then the enforcement of that one God, only one, that's it. And by doing so, we forget that we forget it was ever a part of the plan. We just go, yes, sir, right? So then it became foundational. So then we forgot completely why we're doing what we do, because it became a part of the West. So, in this edited, strictly monotheistic text, which then later gets, becomes this infallible word of God, and then becomes tradition, we forget the actual history. So, I'm not saying by being a Christian you betray both. Not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you know this and you ignore it, then you do. If these are things that can be found, Googled, and are actively talked about in the small circle of scholarship, and I present it to you, then great. But also, don't get angry at people for saying that it isn't true, right? Dive deep into you. Figure out why it makes you feel the way it makes you feel. They don't say that thing. Why do I like that thing that you say? Figure it out. Dive deep into your own subconscious here. Go, why do I feel that way? Why does that make me do that weird little I get tense all of a sudden? It's because it's uncomfortable. But also, you don't grow unless you're uncomfortable. So if anything, this video, if you gotten this far, it didn't click off and then leave a hateful Christian comment, it's because I'm just saying what is already known. Maybe not in your circle, maybe it's something new, but bring it up. Talk about it. Discuss in your own community what this could mean, what it means to shift focus a little bit, get a new perspective, gain someone else's perspective, right? And again, the Ugaritic texts were a very recent discovery, but it was a thing that ended with the Bronze Age, and we're just happy to find them. So, again, we didn't find them until like late 20s, early 30s. But these are, I'll just go through it now. 1929, right? They accidentally discovered the ruins of Ugarit, right? The Ugaritic text. So for the first time, scholars read the 3,000-year-old tablets of the Canaanite pantheon and realized the phrases, poetic structure, and divine counsels matched the oldest fragments of the Bible word for word. So you can see, again, remember they had the same language, Semitic language, which I think is pretty cool when you get to the ancient Sumerian language as well, is language might be our only option to try to convey a message that we have in our heads. I think it's beautiful in the attempt. Clearly, I'm doing it right now. But it will be fallible. Again, there we go. That's a Greek Socrates idea right there. I don't want to write that down because you'll miss the actual thing we're trying to do here. And I don't know. The more I get older, the more I think about it, I'm like, words, language, is the way that I'm trying to talk to you to explain the intangible thought in my own head. Right? I could be going like this. Right? It's just the sound that I'm making that we've established with those sounds to establish meaning that has a thought. That thought then goes through here and out through the way that I know how. Already, I understand why this could be confusing and why we have so many languages. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. Right? But it makes sense to you trying to convey this idea. And I think when we understand that maybe the history and the text itself might not be so infallible, then we might actually get to the truth of understanding each other's point of view. Oh, I get you now, right? We're using language to do that, right? But it's hard for me to describe, but I hope that message is clear. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. I thought we should go over it. And it was one of the things that really kind of blew open the floodgates here to learning about the historical context of the area, the period, and the people. And if we understand those things, then maybe we can understand the adaptation, the changing, and really get to why it's important and why, yes, the information might hurt someone's feelings. But I think in a way that's valuable, because then it kind of opens you up to looking at something new. Not just taking someone else's word for it. Not just doing it because someone told me so. You go, hey, hold on. Can I ask a question? And then you can open the floodgates for yourself. And all of these notes, I'll try to include them. Do it as best I can. And, now that I've figured all this out, I'll see you next Tuesday.